The first thing Sergeant Hale did upon landing on Xylar Prime was yawn. The war zone buzzed with energy. Kinetic blasts slicing through the dim sky and panicked shouts echoing between the jagged alien structures. Yet there he stood, like a man who had just stepped off a late-night bus, squinting under a sun that seemed to have lost its color. "Does he not hear it?" muttered Yak, his scales rippling with stress. The six-legged Procal officer gaped as Hale, clad in a battered combat suit, glanced around with the expression of someone looking for a decent place to nap. "He hears it," muttered Sorik, one of Yak's own squad mates. The four-eyed Ron clutched his pulse rifle so tightly that the veins on his elongated arms stood out. "He just doesn't care." An energy bolt sizzled by, leaving a smoldering mark on a nearby column of gleaming silvery stone. Yak's heart thumped against his chest cavity, the cold realization settling in. The humans were as reckless as the stories claimed. Hale dropped his rucksack on the ground, the impact muffled by the crunch of shattered glass-like crystals beneath his boots. With practiced ease, he unstrapped his helmet and took a deep breath. Xylar Prime's air was thick with a metallic tang and the kind of humidity that clung like a second skin, but he seemed unbothered. "Might be a good day," Hale said, running a hand through his short, sweat-dampened hair. He sat down on the rucksack, the metallic groans of an enemy assault drone grinding to a halt nearby catching his ear only briefly. Its chassis smoked, taken down by some unseen force or perhaps an errant shot from his own unit. Who could say? None of this seemed to faze him. Yak's quills twitched uncontrollably. "Sergeant Hale, shouldn't we secure the area?" His translator rendered the question in stilted standard, and the hesitation in his voice was barely masked. Hale looked up, one eyebrow arched. "We will, Yak. Let them settle down first. No point in playing chase when they're stirred up like a hornet's nest." He leaned back, resting his weight on his hands, eyes half-lidded as he observed the distant flashes of artillery fire. The ground trembled, a deep rumble rolling beneath them as if the planet itself had a restless heartbeat. The alien soldiers' tense postures only stiffened further. Xylar Prime was no place for peace, and certainly not a place for sleep. Yet Hale stretched his legs out, the picture of relaxation. A distant screech pierced the air, the battle cry of the Zern, followed by a series of sharp hisses. The Zern were known for their ruthless, almost feral attacks, their sharp appendages cutting through squads with a speed that few could counter. Yak clenched his jaw, ready for an ambush, but Hale merely smirked. "Sounds like they're having a rough time," he commented dryly, as if discussing a distant storm. Sorik blinked all four of his eyes in disbelief. "Rough time? They're advancing on our position." "Let them," Hale replied. He reached into his rucksack and pulled out a ration bar, unwrapping it slowly. "They're used to everyone running. Let's see how they handle it when we don't." The other species around him had grown up with tales of the ferocity of Deathworlders, those who thrived on Earth, a planet with raging seas, volcanic mountains, and creatures that hunted anything foolish enough to show fear. Most dismissed these tales as exaggeration, until moments like this, where a human's calm defied all logic. The Zern finally came into view, a swarm of dark bodies glinting under the alien sun. Their composite eyes reflected the chaos around them, mandibles clicking with anticipation. Yak's instinct screamed at him to take cover, to fire, to do anything but stand there. Yet Hale took another bite, eyes scanning the swarm with a casual interest that bordered on boredom. "Positions," he said, voice even. Yak's limbs obeyed before his mind caught up, scrambling to formation alongside the rest of his squad. The sight of Hale simply sitting as if at a picnic unsettled the Zern's charge. They slowed, hesitating at the sight of this predator who should have been panicking. Now, Hale commanded, and all at once the calm shattered. A well-placed shot from his rifle sent the nearest Zern reeling, and the ensuing volley from the squad erupted in a hailstorm of energy. The Zern faltered. They were used to pursuing prey, not encountering a creature who seemed almost amused by their advance. Their coordination splintered, confusion spreading through their ranks as they tried to make sense of the human's audacious composure. Hale stood, dusting off his hands as the last of the Zern retreated beyond the shrapnel-strewn horizon. "See? They don't know what to do with patience," he said as casually as one might discuss a card trick. Yak's chest heaved, each breath tasting of ozone and adrenaline. For the first time, He saw why the Deathworlders were feared across the stars. They didn't just survive chaos, they embraced it, found a way to bend it into something that felt almost ordinary. "Sergeant," Yak began, voice steadying. "How can you be so untroubled?" Hale's gaze shifted to the alien, a spark of humor in his eyes. "Simple, Yak. If you're not the storm, you learn to ride it." And just like that, he slung his rifle over his shoulder and nodded to the horizon. "Come on, let's get a better view." The aliens followed, their steps uneasy, but with a new understanding that seemed to pulse in the air between them. The ridge Hale led them to offered a view of the battlefield that stretched far beyond the horizon. A patchwork of smoldering ruins and jagged alien architecture. The dull thrum of distant energy blasts punctuated the silence, a reminder that war here never truly paused. Yak scanned the horizon, his eyes picking out the glint of enemy movements in the distance, shifting shadows that danced beneath towering structures. "How did you know they'd break?" Sorik asked, unable to keep the awe from his voice. The Ron's 4 eyes darted nervously, one set scanning the darkened skies above for the drone scouts that often heralded another wave. Hale sat down again, this time on a large flat rock jutting out like an ancient throne. "Simple," he said, tapping his chest. "They're predators, but not like us. They're used to things running, hiding. It's a different game when the prey stares back." A few of the squad members exchanged uneasy glances. The concept of a battle that wasn't driven by sheer panic or desperate maneuvers was foreign to them. Xylar Prime was a place where bravery eroded fast, where the strongest resolve could melt under the constant barrage of alien assaults. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid scent of burning metal and scorched earth. Yak's quills twitched again, a reflex he couldn't quite suppress. He glanced sideways at Hale, who appeared to be taking in the scenery like a tourist. "So, Sergeant Hale," Yak said cautiously, "do you think they'll regroup?" Hale's mouth twitched into a half-smile. "Of course, but now they'll be second-guessing themselves. That's our edge. They think they know us until they don't." He stretched out his arms, rolling his shoulders as if loosening muscles after a long nap. "Now we play the waiting game, suited to a man waiting for a train then facing down an enemy. Why do we want them to spot us so easily?" Sorak asked, curiosity mingled with fear. "Because," Hale said, eyes fixed on the horizon, "tonight we need them to think they've won the psychological game." The drones buzzed into view moments later, a trio of beetle-like machines that skimmed over the rough terrain, their sensors glinting under the dim alien sky. They hovered, taking in the squad's deliberately relaxed formation before darting back in the direction they came. "They're going to report this," Alak said, voice pitched with tension. "Exactly," Hale replied, a grin forming on his face. "And when they do, the Zern will come running, thinking we're underprepared. They won't expect what happens next." The minutes dragged by like hours, each second heavy with anticipation. The squad waited, eyes scanning the distance for any sign of movement. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long, shifting shadows across the battlefield. The air cooled slightly, bringing a deceptive calm. Then they heard it, a low chittering sound carried by the wind, punctuated by guttural clicks. The Zern were approaching, their numbers masked by the dark. The squad tensed, weapons ready, but Hale remained in place, eyes steady and unblinking. "Hold," he commanded softly. As the first figures emerged from the gloom, the Zern moved with practiced silence, their segmented bodies shifting in a synchronized rhythm, eyes reflecting a deadly intelligence. Hale waited until they were within range, until the confusion of seeing the seemingly lax formation had them hesitating, questioning. It was then, in that heartbeat of doubt, that Hale raised his hand. "Now," he said, voice as calm as the breeze. The squad sprang into action. Energy blasts cut through the night, illuminating the battlefield in staccato flashes. The Zern recoiled, their surprise palpable as the sloppy perimeter defense turned into a tightly orchestrated barrage. Hale stepped into the fray, his rifle a blur, each shot precise, calculated. The Zern faltered, their advance breaking apart like water against stone. Panic rippled through their ranks, and in moments, they were in full retreat, skittering back into the shadows from which they came. When silence fell again, it was deeper, almost reverent. The squad exchanged glances, all mingled with exhaustion. Yu's quills settled for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Hale's voice cut through the night. "Good work," he said, as if they had just wrapped up a training exercise. Sorik let out a shaky breath. "Sergeant, what now?" Hale's eyes glinted under the faint starlight. "Now we let them wonder why we're still smiling." The Zern did not return immediately. The battlefield, scarred and silent, stretched under the faint glow of distant stars. The squad took turns maintaining a watchful eye while the others rested, muscles aching from the tense engagement. Alak sat with Sorak, their bodies slumped against a shard of cracked, obsidian-like stone, eyes darting over the jagged landscape. Hale stood nearby, arms crossed, his face shadowed but calm. The alien soldiers exchanged whispers behind him, wondering aloud about the next attack. Hale's composure had bought them a rare reprieve, a moment where survival didn't seem like a fever dream. "Sergeant," Alak said, breaking the silence that settled like a heavy blanket, "do you think they'll come again tonight?" Hale's eyes flickered, catching a glint from the rising moon. "Yes," he said, as if discussing the certainty of dawn. "But this time, we're ready for it." Yak glanced at the squad members, whose eyes drooped with exhaustion, their scales dulled by the grime of combat. They were creatures of instinct, creatures who knew that rest was a luxury that could mean death. Yet here they were, following a human who chose to sit when others would flee. "Rest," Hale continued, as if reading their thoughts. "You need it more than you think." The Ron's 4 eyes blinked in disbelief. Rest? The word was as foreign as peace on Xylar Prime. But Hale leaned back, letting the cool night air wash over him, the kind of stillness that carried a strange weight. It was a paradox, this calm in the middle of chaos, like the eye of a storm that only he seemed to understand. The silence stretched until a sharp rustle cut through it, distant but unmistakable. Yak shot up, rifle trained on the darkness. Hale stayed motionless, his gaze fixed on the horizon, a hunter listening for prey. The Zern emerged again, their eyes glinting under the silvered light. They approached cautiously this time, their segmented bodies moving in a wave-like pattern as if trying to anticipate another trick. "Hold," Hale's voice whispered over the comms, even as adrenaline surged through Yak's veins. The Zern came closer, their mandibles clicking in a chorus that reverberated through the ground. Hale's comms spread through the squad like a contagion. It was more than a command, it was a lesson. Panic was a choice, one they could refuse. When the lead Zern was within striking distance, Hale rose, not in a rush, but deliberately, the motion smooth and confident. The creature halted, confusion flickering in its multifaceted eyes. Before it could react, Hale snapped his rifle up and fired a single, decisive shot that echoed across the ridge. The Zern hesitated, caught between the instinct to charge and the unfamiliar dance of doubt. In that breath of hesitation, the squad launched their assault. Energy bolts lit up the night, the rhythmic chaos synchronized with the unwavering figure of Hale directing them like an orchestra conductor. Alak found himself moving with a confidence he hadn't known he possessed. The fear that once clouded his vision was now replaced by sharp focus. The Zern, known for their relentless pursuit, faltered as their momentum crumbled. "Push them back," Hale commanded, his voice cutting through the clash like a blade. And they did. They drove the enemy past the shattered remnants of structures and into the open, vulnerable to the final sweeping barrage. The last Zern fell, its limbs curling inward like dried leaves. The silence that followed felt deeper than before, as if the world had exhaled for the first time in ages. Source's chest heaved, the pulse rifle in his grip trembling as he surveyed the carnage. "Is it over?" he whispered, the words carrying a note of hope that sounded foreign even to him. Hale didn't respond immediately. He took a slow, steady breath, eyes scanning the field as if listening to a story only he could hear. The air was sharp with the scent of burned metal and ozone, but beneath that lay the subtle, unspoken truth: they had survived. "For now," Hale said finally, but his tone carried no weight of fear. It was a statement, not a warning. He looked over his squad, battle-worn, tired, yet standing. The Death Worlder nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Good work. Now we rest." Yak's eyes met Sorak's, a look passing between them that spoke volumes. Rest was not weakness. Rest was the defiance of death itself, the refusal to bow to a universe that demanded perpetual fear. As the moon climbed higher, casting its pale glow over the battlefield, Hale sat back down on his rucksack, eyes closing as if listening to the lullaby of silence for the first time. Yak and the others did the same, muscles relaxing as they leaned against the cold stone. The night stretched on, quiet and deep, a testament to survival and the lesson they had learned. Strength wasn't only in the fight. Sometimes it was in knowing when to sit down and breathe.